hands. Everyone wants to stand, I roll in my jag. Fast like the wind, everybody's on the board. Room to the streets, I'm the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands, every woman wants to stand. I roll in my jag, fast like the wind. Every mission I take, you know I'm gonna win. Ladies on my left, danger on the right. But it's love and respect that I'm bringing to the fight.
I'm the dad with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire, can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right.
Got my eyes on the prize, but my heart's in the beat. J-Cat's on the mic, bring the heat to the street. When it comes to the ladies, I'm smooth like silk, but don't get it twisted. I'm the man with the milk. For every tear that falls, I'm the hand to hold. In this world of chaos, I'm the story untold. With every breath I take, every move I make, I'm writing my name in the history is fate.
I'm the dad with the 9 lives.
Welcome to the adventures of J-Cat, where thrills meet tenderness in a captivating blend of sexy, excitement and romance. Hosted by the adventurous Jay Bahari, this hip podcast invites listeners to embark on exhilarating journeys filled with captivating stories and heartfelt moments. Each episode explores the intriguing intersections of adventure and love, transporting you to breathtaking romance and inspiring tales that will leave you yearning for your own escapades. Whether you're a seasoned traveler, a hopeless romantic, or simply someone who appreciates a great story, J-Cat Adventures promises a delightful escape into the extraordinary, sparking your imagination and igniting your wanderlust. Tune in and let the adventures begin.
Can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right.
Hi, I am your host Jay Bahari. Let's go. The city at night was a different beast, a sprawling jungle of shadows and secrets where danger lurked around every corner. J-Cat moved through it like a predator, his senses sharp, his mind focused on a single, burning goal: revenge. The tip he had received earlier that evening echoed in his mind, driving him forward with relentless determination. Camille's killer was out there, and J-Cat would stop at nothing to bring them to justice. No, justice wasn't the right word. This was about retribution, about making someone pay in blood for the life they had stolen from him. The streets were quiet as he made his way toward the warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The sound of his footsteps was absorbed by the wet pavement, the air heavy with the scent of rain and gasoline. The warehouse was a known haunt for the city's underworld, a place where deals were made and lives were lost without a second thought. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and J-Cat knew it. But he didn't care. He wasn't walking into this blind. He was walking in prepared to do whatever it took. As he approached the warehouse, he could see the faint glow of lights through the dirty windows. The building loomed ahead of him, a hulking silhouette against the night sky, its rusted walls stained with the memories of 1,000 illicit transactions. J-Cat slowed his pace, his hand instinctively moving to the gun at his side. The darkness inside him stirred, a familiar companion that had grown stronger since Camille's death, feeding off his pain, his anger, his need for vengeance. He slipped through a side door, moving with the stealth of a seasoned operative. The interior of the warehouse was just as he had imagined, dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of oil and metal. Crates were stacked haphazardly against the walls, creating a maze of shadows and blind spots. It was a perfect place for an ambush, but J-Cat was ready. He had been ready for this moment since the day Camille had died in his arms, her blood warm and sticky on his hands. The sound of voices reached his ears, low and muffled, coming from deeper within the warehouse. J-Cat moved toward them, his footsteps silent, his body tense for action. The darkness inside him pulsed with anticipation, a coiled spring ready to snap. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, sharpening his focus, heightening his senses. This was what he had been waiting for, the moment when he would finally face the person responsible for Camille's death. As he rounded a corner, the voices grew louder, more distinct. He could hear the scrape of a chair against concrete, the clink of a glass being set down. There were at least 3 men in the room, maybe more. It didn't matter. J-Cat had faced worse odds before, and he had come out on top every time. Tonight would be no different. He edged closer, peering around the corner to get a better view. The room was larger than he had expected, filled with crates and barrels, their contents unknown. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a harsh light over the men gathered around a makeshift table. They were talking in low tones, their faces obscured by the shadows. But J-Cat didn't need to see them to know they were dangerous. He could feel it in the way they moved, the way they carried themselves. These were men who had seen death, who had dealt in it. But so had J-Cat. He waited, watching, listening, his mind calculating the best approach. The darkness inside him urged him to strike, to unleash the fury that had been building inside him for so long. But J-Cat held back, waiting for the perfect moment. He wanted them to see him coming, to know that their time had run out. This wasn't just about killing, it was about sending a message. Finally, the moment came. One of the men stood, turning toward the door, his hand reaching for a cigarette. J-Cat stepped out of the shadows, his gun raised, his eyes locked on his target. Looking for this? J-Cat's voice was cold, devoid of emotion, as he pulled the trigger. The first man didn't even have time to react. The bullet struck him square in the chest, sending him crashing back into the table. The other men scrambled, reaching for their weapons, but J-Cat was faster. He moved with the precision of a machine, his shots landing with deadly accuracy. The room erupted into chaos, the sound of gunfire echoing off the walls. But J-Cat was in control. This was what he had been trained for, what he had become in the wake of Camille's death, a weapon, a force of destruction. He moved through the room like a phantom, his movements fluid, calculated. The men fell one by one, their blood mixing with the grime on the warehouse floor. The last man standing was the one who had been leading the conversation. He was older, grizzled, with the look of someone who had seen too much and done too little about it. He was different from the others, not just in age, but in the way he carried himself. There was a weight to him, a presence that spoke of power and authority. J-Cat knew instantly, this was the man he had been looking for. The man who knew the truth about Camille's death. The man raised his hands in surrender, his eyes wide with fear. Wait. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, J-Cat interrupted, his voice a low growl. The darkness inside him surged, demanding retribution, but he held it back, just for a moment longer. You're going to tell me everything. And if I don't like what I hear, I'll talk. The man stammered, his bravado crumbling under J-Cat's icy gaze. Just, don't kill me. J-Cat lowered his gun slightly, but his eyes never left the man's face. Start talking. Now. The man took a shaky breath, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. But there was none. He was trapped, and he knew it. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, he began, his voice trembling. We were just supposed to scare her, get her to back off. But things got out of hand. J-Cat's grip tightened on the gun, his knuckles white. And now things are going to get out of hand for you. Who gave the order? The man hesitated, his fear palpable. It was someone high up. I don't know their name, but they're connected. Deep pockets, powerful friends. Camille was digging too deep, asking questions she wasn't supposed to. They couldn't let her keep digging. Who? J-Cat demanded, his patience wearing thin. Give me a name. I swear, I don't know. The man cried, desperation creeping into his voice. But I can give you something. A location. They have a safe house, a place where they keep their secrets. If you go there, you'll find what you're looking for. J-Cat stared at the man, weighing his options. He had heard this kind of talk before, promises of leads that led nowhere, of trails that went cold. But this felt different. The man was genuinely terrified, and J-Cat knew fear when he saw it. Where is it? J-Cat asked, his voice low and dangerous. The man rattled off an address, a location on the outskirts of the city, deep in the industrial district. It was the kind of place where no one would think to look, where things could disappear without a trace. J-Cat committed the address to memory, his mind already planning his next move. But before he could leave, the man spoke again, his voice trembling. They're expecting you, J-Cat. They know you're coming. And they won't let you leave alive. J-Cat's expression hardened. They'll have to try harder than that. With one last look at the man, J-Cat turned and walked out of the warehouse, leaving the bodies and the blood behind him. The darkness inside him was still there, simmering just beneath the surface, but he kept it in check. There would be time for vengeance later. Right now, he had a lead to follow, a killer to find. Camille's death would not go unpunished. Not while J-Cat was still breathing. The hunt was on, and nothing would stop him until justice was served. The cold night air hit J-Cat's face as he stepped out of the warehouse, the stench of blood and gunpowder lingering in his nostrils. The city lights flickered in the distance, a reminder of the world that kept spinning, oblivious to the carnage that had just unfolded. But J-Cat was far from done. The address the man had given him was his next destination, a place that could finally lead him to the puppet master behind Camille's murder. As he climbed into his Jaguar XJ220, the sleek black car roared to life, a beast ready to be unleashed. The engine's growl mirrored the fury bubbling within him, a storm that had been building ever since he'd held Camille's lifeless body in his arms. The dashboard lights illuminated his face, casting sharp shadows that emphasized the steely determination in his eyes. Camille's death had awakened something dark within him, a relentless force that demanded retribution. The streets blurred past as J-Cat drove, his mind racing as fast as his car. The industrial district was a place he knew all too well, a haven for criminals, a playground for those who thrived in the shadows. It was fitting, in a twisted way, that the trail led him here. This was where deals were made in the dead of night, where lives were snuffed out without a second thought. And tonight, J-Cat was going to leave his mark on it. As he neared the address, the cityscape began to change. The tall, glittering buildings gave way to rundown warehouses and abandoned factories, their windows shattered, their walls covered in graffiti. It was a place forgotten by the rest of the world, a place where the rules didn't apply. J-Cat pulled into an alleyway, parking his car in the shadows before stepping out into the frigid night. The air was thick with the smell of rust and decay, a fitting backdrop for the violence that was sure to follow. He moved swiftly, his footsteps silent on the cracked pavement as he approached the building. The safe house was nondescript, just another crumbling structure in a sea of dereliction. But J-Cat could feel the danger lurking within, a tension that crackled in the air like static electricity. He scanned the area, his trained eyes picking up the telltale signs of surveillance, cameras hidden in the eaves, motion sensors embedded in the walls. Whoever was inside was well prepared, expecting trouble. But J-Cat wasn't just any trouble. He was a storm waiting to be unleashed. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a device that emitted a low hum as it scanned the frequency spectrum. A few tweaks, and the cameras went dark, the sensors disabled. J-Cat wasn't about to walk into a trap. He was the one setting it. With practiced ease, he bypassed the door's electronic lock, slipping inside the building without a sound. The interior was just as grim as the exterior, dusty, dark, with a faint smell of mildew hanging in the air. But there was something else, too. A faint, metallic scent that sent a shiver down his spine. Blood. J-Cat moved cautiously, his gun at the ready as he advanced deeper into the building. The layout was straightforward, long corridors, rooms on either side, all dark and silent. But he wasn't fooled. He could feel the presence of others, the subtle shifts in the air, the almost imperceptible sounds of breathing. They were waiting for him, just as the man had said. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. As he reached the end of the hallway, he spotted a faint light seeping through the cracks of a door. J-Cat took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The darkness within him surged, hungry for blood, for the thrill of the hunt. He pushed the door open, stepping into a large room filled with monitors and equipment, the walls lined with photos and documents. It was a command center, the nerve hub of an operation far bigger than he had anticipated. And in the center of it all stood a man J-Cat had never seen before, a tall, thin figure with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. He was flanked by two armed guards, their guns trained on J-Cat the moment he entered. But J-Cat didn't flinch. He met the man's gaze head-on, his expression unreadable, his body coiled like a spring. "So, you're the one causing all this trouble," the man said, his voice smooth, almost amused. "I have to say, I'm impressed. Few make it this far." J-Cat didn't respond. He didn't need to. His eyes were locked on the man's, every muscle in his body primed for action. The darkness inside him was raging now, a maelstrom of fury and pain that he barely contained. This was the man behind Camille's death. He could feel it in his bones. "I suppose you want answers," the man continued, stepping forward, his guards following suit. "But I'm afraid the only thing you're going to get tonight is a bullet. You've meddled in affairs far beyond your understanding, and now it's time to pay the price." The man's hand moved to his side, but J-Cat was faster. In the blink of an eye, he drew his gun and fired, the shot echoing through the room like a thunderclap. The first guard went down before he could react, his body crumpling to the floor. The second managed to get off a shot, but J-Cat was already moving, dodging the bullet with a grace that seemed almost inhuman. His return shot was lethal, the guard dropping to the ground, lifeless. The man's expression twisted in shock and anger, but he recovered quickly, pulling out his own weapon. But J-Cat was relentless. He closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, knocking the gun from the man's hand with a swift, brutal strike. The man staggered back, clutching his hand in pain, but J-Cat wasn't finished. He grabbed the man by the collar, slamming him against the wall, his eyes blazing with a fury that sent chills down the man's spine. "Why?" J-Cat growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Why did you kill her?" The man struggled, his face contorting in fear. "It wasn't personal. She was digging too deep, getting too close. We had to stop her." J-Cat's grip tightened, his knuckles turning white. "You didn't stop her. You murdered her." "It was a mistake." The man gasped, his voice shaking. "I didn't want to." Wrong answer. J-Cat didn't wait for a confession. He had all the answers he needed. With a single, decisive movement, he knocked the man out, his body slumping to the floor, unconscious. J-Cat stood over him, breathing heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. The darkness inside him roared, demanding more, demanding blood. But J-Cat held it back, just barely. This wasn't over. Not yet. He turned to the monitors, scanning the screens filled with images and data. They were tracking everything, movements, communications, even financial transactions. And in the midst of it all, one name kept appearing, over and over again. It wasn't the man he had just taken down. No, this went higher, much higher. J-Cat's eyes narrowed as he focused on the name, a cold, calculating fury settling over him. The hunt was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. Camille's death would be avenged, and J-Cat would make sure that everyone involved paid the ultimate price. As he walked out of the building, leaving the man and his guards behind, J-Cat knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't stop. Not until the last man standing was dead. Not until Camille could rest in peace. The darkness inside him was his ally now, fueling his drive, his need for vengeance. And as long as it burned within him, J-Cat would hunt. And he would not stop hunting until justice was served. J-Cat's hands were steady as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing with the information he had just uncovered. The name he had found on the monitors, the one that appeared over and over again, was someone he never expected to be involved. It wasn't just any name, it was a name that carried weight, influence, and power. A name that could make people disappear without a trace. The man behind Camille's death wasn't some faceless criminal operating in the shadows. It was someone high up, someone who had everything to lose if the truth came out. And now J-Cat had the leverage he needed to take the fight to them. But he also knew that this new enemy would be much more dangerous, much more cunning than the low-level thugs he'd dealt with so far. He drove through the city with a sense of purpose, his destination clear in his mind. He needed to regroup, to plan his next move carefully. The stakes were too high for him to rush in without a strategy. He had to be methodical, precise, and above all, ruthless. The person he was up against wouldn't hesitate to kill him, and J-Cat had no intention of giving them that chance. He pulled into the underground parking garage of a nondescript building, the kind of place that blended into the background, unnoticed by the average passerby. This was one of his safe houses, a place where he could lay low and gather his thoughts without fear of being found. As he stepped out of the car, the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders, but it only strengthened his resolve. Inside, the safe house was minimalist and functional, just the way J-Cat liked it. A few essential pieces of furniture, a secure communications setup, and a small arsenal of weapons hidden behind a false wall. He moved to the desk, where a laptop awaited, its screen glowing softly in the dim light. He needed to dig deeper, to find out who this person really was and why they had targeted Camille. As he began typing, his mind wandered back to her. Camille had been more than just a lover, she had been a partner, someone who understood the risks of his world but chose to stay by his side anyway. Losing her had shattered something inside him, and now, that brokenness was the driving force behind his every move. The pain was still fresh, a raw wound that wouldn't heal until justice was served. The information he uncovered in the next few hours painted a chilling picture. The person he was after had ties to some of the most powerful people in the city, politicians, businessmen, and even law enforcement. They operated from within the system, using their influence to control everything from the shadows. Camille had gotten too close to exposing them, and that's why she had to die. But J-Cat was different. He wasn't bound by the rules of the system, and he didn't care about the consequences. All that mattered was making sure the people responsible paid for what they had done. He knew it wouldn't be easy, they would come after him with everything they had. But he was ready. The darkness inside him, the relentless need for revenge, would guide him through the storm. With a plan forming in his mind, J-Cat decided it was time to bring in reinforcements. He couldn't do this alone, not if he wanted to succeed. He made a few calls, reaching out to old contacts, people he trusted implicitly. They were all seasoned operatives, people who had worked with him before and knew how to get things done. They owed him favors, and now he was calling them in. As he waited for his team to assemble, J-Cat couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The hunt was on, and he was ready to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Camille's killers had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated how far J-Cat was willing to go for vengeance. By the time his team arrived, the atmosphere in the safe house had shifted. It was no longer a place of quiet reflection, it was a war room, buzzing with energy and determination. J-Cat briefed them on the situation, laying out the plan with cold precision. There was no room for error, no margin for failure. They were up against powerful forces, but J-Cat had an advantage. They didn't know he was coming. As the night deepened, J-Cat's thoughts drifted once more to Camille. Her memory was a constant presence, a guiding light in the darkness that surrounded him. He would make them pay for what they did to her. And when it was over, when justice was finally served, he would stand over the ashes of those who wronged her, knowing that he had fulfilled his promise. The hunt was far from over, but J-Cat was ready. The darkness within him had been unleashed, and it wouldn't rest until it had consumed everything in its path. J-Cat stood at the edge of the city, the wind howling through the empty streets as the first hints of dawn painted the sky in shades of gray and orange. His breath misted in the cold air, his pulse steady and calm despite the storm brewing inside him. The world around him was quiet, almost deceptively peaceful, but he knew better. This was the calm before the storm, the final moments of silence before the chaos erupted. His hand rested on the cold metal of his gun, the weight of it a familiar comfort. It had been his companion through countless missions, a silent partner that never failed him. But tonight, it felt heavier, laden with the burden of the task ahead, and the promise of vengeance that had brought him here. Camille's face flashed in his mind, her smile, her laughter, the warmth of her presence. All of it was gone now, ripped away by the cruelty of a world that cared little for justice or love. J-Cat had spent the last few weeks tracing the threads of a vast conspiracy, a web of deceit and power that stretched far beyond what he had initially imagined. Camille's death had been the catalyst, the event that set everything in motion. But as he dug deeper, he realized it was just the tip of the iceberg. The people behind it were powerful, untouchable by ordinary means. They hid behind layers of protection, wealth, influence, and the ruthless elimination of anyone who got too close. But J-Cat was no ordinary man. He was relentless, driven by a need for justice that bordered on obsession. The darkness inside him had grown with each revelation, each new piece of evidence that pointed to the men who had taken Camille from him. It was a fire that burned deep within, consuming every other thought, every other emotion. He had become a creature of vengeance, his humanity pushed to the edges of his consciousness, leaving only the raw, primal need to make them pay. The hunt had taken him across the globe, from the sun-scorched deserts of the Middle East to the snow-covered peaks of the Swiss Alps. He had followed leads in the seedy underbellies of bustling cities, navigated the treacherous politics of corrupt governments, and faced down enemies who would have broken lesser men. But J-Cat wasn't just a man anymore, he was an unstoppable force, a predator hunting his prey through the darkest corners of the world. He had lost track of time, the days and nights blending into a relentless pursuit of those responsible. Sleep had become a luxury he could no longer afford, his mind too consumed by the images of Camille's last moments to allow him any peace. Every lead he followed brought him closer, but it also revealed the depths of the conspiracy, the layers of protection that surrounded those at the top. They thought they were safe, that they could operate in the shadows without consequence. But J-Cat was the darkness they had never anticipated. The night had been a blur of action, a series of calculated moves that brought him closer to the heart of the conspiracy. He had infiltrated a high-security compound, taken down guards with silent precision, and gathered the intel he needed. The names he had discovered were powerful, well-connected, and ruthless. But they had one weakness: they didn't know J-Cat was coming for them. As he moved through the city, his senses were heightened, every sound and movement analyzed for potential threats. He was a hunter on the prowl, his instincts sharp and deadly. He had no doubt that they would come for him, that they would try to eliminate him before he got any closer. But that was exactly what he wanted. He was done hiding, done playing by their rules. Now, he would bring the fight to them. The first explosion rocked the city just as dawn broke, a fiery signal that the endgame had begun. J-Cat had rigged their safe houses, their secret meeting spots, with enough explosives to level entire buildings. He had taken out their communications, their ability to coordinate and plan. Now, they were vulnerable, exposed for the first time. It was time to finish what he had started. He moved through the chaos like a shadow, striking with lethal precision. The men he faced were trained, seasoned killers, but they were no match for him. J-Cat was a force of nature, a whirlwind of destruction that tore through their ranks without hesitation. He felt no remorse, no pity, only the cold satisfaction of knowing he was finally delivering justice for Camille. By the time the sun was fully up, the city was in flames. The men who had orchestrated Camille's death lay dead or dying, their empire of lies and corruption reduced to rubble. J-Cat stood in the midst of the destruction, his heart pounding with the adrenaline of battle. But as the last of his enemies fell, a strange emptiness settled over him. The hunt was over. Camille's killers were dead. But the darkness inside him remained, a void that nothing could fill. He had avenged her, but it had come at a cost. The man he had been, the one who had loved and laughed with her, was gone. In his place was a creature forged in the fires of revenge, a man who had given up everything to see justice done. J-Cat knew there would be no peace for him, no rest. The darkness had become a part of him, a shadow that would follow him wherever he went. The hunt might be over, but the war within him was just beginning. He turned away from the burning city, the sounds of sirens and chaos fading into the background. There was nothing left for him here, nothing to hold him. He had done what he came to do, but at what cost? The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, J-Cat would never stop hunting. Not as long as there were people like Camille's killers out there, people who thought they could operate without consequence. The hunt would continue, and J-Cat would be there, in the shadows, waiting for the next battle. Because in a world as dark and cruel as this one, he had learned that the only way to survive was to embrace the darkness within. J-Cat, the price of deception. The night air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of traffic as J-Cat walked down the dimly lit street. The city was alive, pulsing with energy, but he moved through it like a ghost, unnoticed and unbothered. He had spent the past few weeks wrapped up in a case that took him from one end of the world to the other, and now, back in familiar territory, he was looking forward to a rare moment of peace. But as always, fate had other plans. His senses were honed to a razor's edge. He could feel the eyes on him, the presence lurking in the shadows, waiting. It was the kind of instinct that had kept him alive through countless missions, and tonight, it was telling him that something was off. He paused, scanning the street for any sign of danger, but everything seemed normal. Just another night in the city. Then, out of nowhere, she appeared. She moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, her dark hair flowing like a curtain behind her as she walked past him. There was something about her, something familiar that tugged at the edges of his memory, but he couldn't place it. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and he felt a strange jolt in his chest, as if some unseen force had reached inside and twisted his heart. He didn't recognize her, not immediately, but there was a nagging feeling that he should. Her presence lingered in his mind long after she had disappeared into the crowd, a ghostly echo that refused to be silenced. He continued on his way, trying to shake the feeling, but it clung to him like a shadow, a constant reminder that something wasn't right. And that's a wrap on this episode of J-Cat Adventures. I hope you've enjoyed the journey and the excitement. Don't forget to subscribe or simply get in touch with me by video call, or audio text chat. Let me know if you enjoyed the podcast. I would love to know what you think about J-Cat Adventures. Until next time, keep your spirit of adventure alive, and remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. This is Jay Bahari, signing off. Stay curious, stay bold, and keep exploring. Also, you can find J-Cat products at www.jcatadventures.com and at Amazon.
Every mission I take, you know I'm gonna win. Ladies on my left, danger on the right, but it's love and respect that I'm bringing to the fight. I'm the cat with the 9 lives playing the game, a heart full of fight, can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right. Doing it right. Got my eyes on the prize, but my heart's in the beat. J-Cat's on the mic, bringing heat to the street. When it comes to the ladies, I'm smooth like silk, but don't get it twisted, I'm the man with the milk. For every tear that falls, I'm the hand to hold. In this world of chaos, I'm the story untold. With every breath I take, every move I make, I'm writing my name in the history is fate. I'm the cat with the 9 lives playing the game, a heart full of fire, can't be tamed. In the shadows I roam, but I shine so bright. With every step I take, I'm doing it right. Doing it right.